Next, we move on to the price instrument. So these are the market-based mechanisms that creates a favorable price regime from renewable energy and let the market determine the quantity. So this is again, it's a follow-up from the discussion that we had earlier, that although the cost of production of renewable is falling down a lot and there is a lot of investment activities that are experienced in this area, it's still, the cost of producing power from renewable is still quite high as compared to the conventional sources. Therefore, there comes the role of the price instrument, where it tries to make the playing field level for both renewable and the non-renewable. Under the price instruments, we are going to discuss two things. One is called a feed-in tariff and the other is called the fiscal incentive. So the primary objective of fiscal incentive is to lower the cost of production of renewable energy sources in order to make it more competitive. Now again, I would like to spend 1 minute on the term fiscal. So fiscal means budgetary, something which is related to tax and subsidy. So when the government gives some tax credit or it gives some subsidy, all of them, they come under the fiscal incentive. But this is generally the meaning of fiscal. This is related to budget. We start with the fiscal incentive. There are various instruments that fall under the umbrella category of fiscal incentive. It starts from accelerated depreciation to capital subsidy, which is also known as capital buy down. It can be investment tax credit or it can be production tax credit as well. We'll take up all the instruments one by one and we'll spend some 1 or 2 minutes on each of them. So we begin with accelerated depreciation. First of all, what is depreciation? Depreciation is the money that is set aside by some industrial firm in order to capture the wear and tear of the machinery. So it goes on in like this. So suppose today I invest some money in order to buy a particular machine whose lifetime is 10 years. So after 10 years this machine is not going to work anymore. But it doesn't happen in one day. It's actually because of the everyday's wear and tear that it is happening. So if that is the case, then what we have is that for this everyday's wear and tear, this company is setting aside some amount of money, which is called the depreciation and which is calculated as a part of financial cost of the company. Now, when the tax is calculated, it is calculated on the earning of the firm. If you can show a part of your earning as a cost, so the part of revenue that you are earning is being accounted for your depreciation, which is a cost, so you are left with less amount of revenue which is taxable, right? So if you can show the increased depreciation during the initial years of the machinery, then during those initial years you are going to get some tax benefit. So if you see what we have written here, the accelerated depreciation accounts for greater cost of producer on account of depreciation in the earlier years of the life of an asset. As a result, the taxable income is relatively lower in the initial years. How does it help the investor? The investor knows that if the time period over which he or she is going to get back the investment is longer, then it's good to have accelerated depreciation, which shows that your cost is also higher at the initial period. As a result, your net revenue is lower. As a result, your taxable income is lower. So you are actually paying less amount of tax in the initial years if you can show a greater rate of depreciation of your asset during the initial years. And that is in somewhat that is logical, because when a kind of machinery is purchased, it's more heavily used in the initial years, so you can expect more of wear and tear is happening in the initial years as compared to the end. And therefore this accelerated depreciation, it has both an economic as well as technical grounding in itself. In India, we had the policy of accelerated depreciation. We actually have the policy of accelerated depreciation, but until March 2017, it was 80% of accelerated. So in the first year, you could have shown the 80% depreciation, the 80% depreciation, and you get the tax benefit according to that. However, that was reduced to 40% in the post 2017 period. Now the accelerated depreciation has come down in India There was a lot of controversy at that time which was going on regarding the effect of this reduction in accelerated depreciation. The second one that we are going to talk about is the capital subsidy, which is also known as capital buy down. Now, what is capital subsidy? It's simply that the government subsidizes a part of capital investment for the installation of renewable energy generation plant. So if I want to invest in the renewable energy generation, then the government will give me for some amount of money, say rupees X, for up to Y% of installed system cost. So if my installed system cost is say 1000 rupees, then the government may say that I am going to cover some 2% of that 1000 rupees up to a kind of ceiling. So this is subsidizing the investment, that is the capital subsidy. Now it's not always have to come in the form of subsidizing the capital if the government want to motivate people to go for the investment in renewables. Although we are talking about fiscal incentives which has to do with tax and subsidy, but there can be other forms of incentives as well. For example, again, if you go back to the renewable energy, Maharashtra renewable energy policy documented in 2015, you will see that the wind generators, other than this capital subsidy, were given a lot of facilities when they started their investment. So it was said that the wind generators will be given permission for repowering. The land acquired for commissioning will be deemed as non-agricultural land, which is much easier to procure. The concessions will be given to get the no objection certificates from the Pollution Control Board and so on. So there, other than, so what I'm trying to say is that, see, fiscal incentive is one form of easing the process, but there are other forms as well. And many a times you see that there are multiple instruments working together in order to promote the renewable energy generation in the country. Now, here I would like to point out one thing which again caused a lot of debate in the recent years in India, that India actually imports a lot of solar cells and modules from China and Malaysia. And India government a couple of years back actually imposed an import duty on these solar cells and modules imported from India and China. Now the question is, what do you expect the impact of this policy is going to be on the uptake of or the energy production based on the renewables? The logic behind putting this import duty was there. I mean, the government actually wanted to sort of energize the domestic production sector under the Make in India initiative and discourage the import. But in a short run, what do you think is going to be the impact of this kind of a policy on the renewable energy supply in India? This is just a food for thought. You can think about it later. The third option that we are going to talk about is the investment tax credit. So under capital subsidy, we have seen that the government is actually paying some money in order to subsidize the capital investment. Here, what the government is doing, this is basically a deduction in tax that an individual or company has to pay to the state when investment takes place in renewable. So instead of paying the money in the form of tax to the government, you can use a proportion of money in order to set up the renewable energy supply system. So you are getting a tax credit because you are investing in something which has a public good property. Here again we come back to the discussion of public good and private good that we initiated at the beginning of this week. See, when the tax is collected by the government, what does the government do with this tax? Partly the reason is income redistribution, but majorly when you collect the money, this tax amount, this goes into the investment which has more of a public good property. For example, if I say that I want to set up a school which has a public good property, because the benefit that the school creates cannot be captured in the revenue that is generated out of the revenue generated from the school. The impact is far reach, right? It has a significant impact in the locality. So, but this kind of benefit is a social benefit which is not captured in the private benefit curve. So this kind of, in case of this kind of public projects, it's often the government uses the tax money to promote this kind of public projects. So these are the public investments, or for example road. That's also another public investment. Now, if you think about the renewable energy supply, once the renewable system is there, it's not only producing electricity, but it's also producing certain other co-benefits. We have already discussed that during the lifetime of this energy generation of the renewable energy, the carbon dioxide equivalent that they produce for per unit of power generation is much lower as compared to the non-renewable energy based power generation. But this kind of benefit is difficult to be captured within the private benefit. Therefore, this investment in these renewable energy projects, they have certain public good characteristics. So what the government is saying, that instead of giving me the money in the form of tax, why don't you invest that money in the renewable energy generation, which is again sort of a public project. You can think of it as a public project. So one example, in India, we don't have many tax investment tax credit in place. What the most prominent one is actually in US. This is the solar investment tax credit in United States of America, and the eligible commercial and utility scale projects qualify for 30%, 26% or 22% credit if they are placed in service before a stipulated time period. So for the current cycle, they have to place their service before December 31, 2023, and if they can do that, they'll be getting the tax credit of 30%, 26% or 22%. So what we can see is that the capital subsidy and the investment tax credits, they are designed in a manner so that the investors are more inclined to invest in the renewable energy projects. The next one is the production tax credit, which just follows the investment tax credit. Here the tax credit is not given for the investment, rather the tax credit is actually given depending on the level of production. So if you produce more, then you will get more tax credit, maybe with some upper boundary. So while while this capital subsidy and investment encourages to break the first barrier, the production tax credit actually tries to encourage a sustainable production of energy from renewable sources. So once again we come back to this Maharashtra Energy Policy 2015, which is actually a very vibrant policy. For small hydro projects, a subsidy of 50,000 per kilowatt to maximum up to 1 crore was committed from the green energy farm. So this is an example of production tax credit. So these are, in a nutshell, these are the different types of fiscal incentive. There can be other forms, the main instruments that you have. For example, if we again go back to the Renewable Energy Policy of 2015 of Maharashtra, we'll see that the small hydropower projects, a subsidy of 50,000 rupees per kilowatt was given to these small hydro projects, and the maximum amount that was payable to them was 1 crore. So this is the kind of production tax credit that we have in place in many other states as well. In a nutshell, this is the framework of fiscal incentives that are in place. There can be other instruments as well under fiscal incentive, but broadly these are the main mechanisms that you can see. Finally, we come to the last instrument that we are going to discuss, which is the feed-in tariff, which is again quite popular in India, and most of the states, they follow the mechanism of feed-in tariff. So let us have a quick look at what is feed-in tariff. There are three key features of feed-in tariff. The first one is preferential tariff. The second one is called the power purchase agreement. This is the guaranteed purchase agreement of renewable energy for a specified period of time. And the third is guaranteed access to grid. Under preferential tariff, the logic goes on like this. Since we have already discussed that the levelized cost of energy generated through renewable has higher market price as compared to conventional energy generation, the state has to design a preferential tariff structure for the renewable, so that the discoms or the utilities are sort of quote unquote forced to buy this renewable energy based power at a higher price. So the price is higher, but there has to be some mechanism so that they buy this power. However, you see, in case of feed-in tariff, the quantity is not being determined. So the government is not setting any mandate on to how much renewable energy to be produced, or what percentage of energy supply has to come from renewable energy. So there is no mandate with regard to quantity. The mandate is only with regard to the price. Under the preferential tariff, the discoms, that is the distribution companies, they are under the obligation to buy the renewable energy at an administered tariff, mostly higher than the average cost of power supplied to the end user. This is not only to encourage the supply of the power, but this also ensures that the burden is actually shifted to the actual user of utility and not all over the taxpayers. When we talk about preferential tariff, there are two questions which are addressed. The first one is it technology neutral or is it technology specific? So are these tariffs similar for all technologies, for example solar, wind, geothermal, biomass and so on, or are they going to follow a different mechanism of price determination for the administered price for different technologies? So these are the things that are usually talked about when you think about the policies to promote renewable energy. The second is that is it a constant tariff or is it going to change over time across the location, across the plant size, or what is that? So these are the two questions that are usually addressed when the preferential tariffs are determined. The second component of feed-in tariff comes in the form of guaranteed purchase for a specific period for 15 to 20 years. Why this is so important? Because once the preferential tariff is set, it's known that today the energy that this renewable projects are producing will be sold in the market at a particular price. But what is the guarantee about the years to come in, right? So it is also important that there is some contract stability over a period of time. So when I am investing in a renewable project, I know that there is not only demand for today and tomorrow, the demand will also be there 20 years down the line. So these purchase obligations are very important in order to make the feed-in tariff successful. So here the energy suppliers are obliged to buy the power generated from renewable project over a period of time, not only for 1 year or 2 years, but maybe for 15-20 years, and the price is also fixed at the beginning. I mean, the price can't go down below that. The third one is the guaranteed access to grid. So the feed-in tariff mechanism also takes into consideration the importance of removal of barriers related to insufficient grid capacity available. This is where we are going to stop, and I see you during the next lecture. Thank you.